Hey! I've realized Christianity is more plausible than I thought, Alex Connor. Let's get it, let's go. No time to waste.
I talk about this and I debate this all the time, and I debate whether Jesus was God or whether he even claimed to be God and all of this kind of stuff. For me, the undeniable thing is that there's this extraordinary historical figure who did something extraordinary, and there's something really weird that happened that caused a bunch of people to start quite early on worshipping him, which is a very strange thing to do to a human being, especially in a Jewish culture. And so, to me, getting at the Gospels from a scholarly perspective helps me to understand who this historical figure was. That's the thing I'm really interested in. Almost in the way that somebody might be really interested in Julius Caesar, or in whether the Iliad, whether the Trojan War really happened, and whether that kind of stuff. I sort of take this approach.
That feels to me like that was your point of entry.
Yes. Yeah.
But you've had such a journey, and you've met so many amazing people. You've debated so many different angles and things.
Yeah.
Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, well, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism.
Big dinner box, 8 wings, 5 breadsticks, 2 pizzas, big dinner box, 8 wings.
Stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
What is that?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. It was really popular. The debates that they were doing, they called it New Atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, debate me, bro, kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate, and I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian. Some people say to me, like,
it's a funny word though, that anyway.
Yeah.
Like I'm less and less certain about the word.
Yeah.
You know what somebody said to me the other day? You're like this. Period of greatest growth ever in the history of the church was from 33 AD to 350.
Yeah.
And during this time, there was no church buildings, no sermons, but no singing, and no Bible.
Yeah.
And like we get very tied up in all of those things and the labels and even the phrase Christian.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure where. For me, it feels quite like man-made, these sort of words.
Yeah, and that is where I can definitely agree with, especially a Christian of your kind, which is to say someone who will say that and recognize that. Because some people place a lot of stock, particularly Catholics, and they place a lot of stock in church tradition and the traditions that developed after Nicaea. And I look at that with a similar kind of man-made skepticism. And I think to myself, it also gives me license to, when I look at the New Testament and I think, some scholars think that Paul maybe didn't write that letter and that's a big problem, but for someone like me, it's like, who cares? If I decide that Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, then I'll just look at the rest of it and I'll try to work out what came between the lines. A good friend of mine said to me once, and there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things. You can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for example, have you heard of the Churchillian drift, where like quotes get attributed to Churchill even though he never said them? Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that he never actually said, but that people believed he said. You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill was.
That's worst case scenario. You still get a pretty good...
You're still getting an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and did Jesus really say that? Was this an interpolation? Blah, blah, blah. Is this a translation thing? But...
No, before he goes on, I want you guys to really think about... I like how he's debating it. He's going into it, learning the history, learning about the Council of Nicaea, Exodus, Chalcedon. He's learning all that history, right? And through that, he's coming out like with that question, like just stick to that question for a second. The Bible, this is what people thinks that Jesus said. This is what people who are around him says he said. He didn't write a single word. Strange. It's strange, but it's definitely dope.
The thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is like, who was this guy and what was he doing to cause all of this? Even if it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there, the fact that this scramble to write all of this down and turn it into
even with the drift.
Exactly, it's still
I think
extremely
you would,
interesting.
If we could time travel, you would be one of the rough gang. So would I.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be. I mean, even though you kind of like the headlines of you is like, you know, professor, sort of Oxford. Well, are you a professor?
I'm not a professor. No.
You're very clever. Do you know what I mean? That could potentially like put you into the Pharisee type thing.
Right.
But you are the opposite. You are what you would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah.
And also, I sort of always got the feel with Jesus. He loved the challenge. He loved the riposte. He loved the mental, verbal, theological challenges.
A lot of jousting, a
lot of jousting and brilliant sort of responses that have never been better. You know, whether it's in like, should we pay our taxes to Caesar or not? You know, Pharisees are trying to trip him up. Mm-hmm. And sort of that response of just like, well, whose head is on the coin? You know, paid him and paid to God what is God. It's sort of brilliant.
Yeah, there's a brilliant.
And I would think that I see a beautiful alignment actually. I think if we would go back in time travel, you'd be running wild with it.
Well, if the science ever gets there, and we manage to go back in time, when people say, you know, where would you go?
Where would you go? Carl, what would you do?
Of course, you'd go to meet Jesus.
I know. What point? Where would you go? Would you go after the resurrection, or would you want to be there at the beginning? What about in the 17 years?
That's interesting. You know, I think that the moment that you'd want to witness, if you could only have 5 minutes, would be the moment of the crucifixion. And the reason is, you would see that this was a man, the crucifixion happened, you would see whether the curtain tore, whether the sky opened, all of that kind of stuff, and it would give you all of that. I mean,
But they keep finding evidence for, like, I think in the sort of, you know, the star stuff and they said there was
like the solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse, I've actually done it, the exact kind of like that.
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting. And also that moment is kind of, also to see the first ever Roman Christian. Well,
yes,
the centurion truly son of God. Yeah. This man is the son of God.
But then part of
That's interesting, you go to that moment. That's kind of cool.
But part of me would say, though, you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
are you the real deal?
Messiah, are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question. And, I mean, where would you go in Jesus' life? 5 minutes.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think...
At Tires Plus, save up to $100
My bad, y'all. It's crazy.
So, I mean, if you think of the biblical, so there are a lot of people that did get that chance and did it come exactly for that purpose. Mm-hmm. You know, say, I mean, one bit you might not have noticed that I really like is John the Baptist's relationship with Jesus. We kind of touched on it, but there's a really nice moment where if you think if anyone in the Jesus orbit is going to believe in him, it's John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. Known him from birth, kicking inside my mother's stomach whenever Jesus walked in the room. Like, I know this guy is a real deal. I'm baptizing the River Jordan, saying there was one is coming after me is like, you know, I know. Mm-hmm. And yet when he was in Herod's prison, he gets a chance to get a message to his disciples. One thing he says is go back to Yeshua and just ask him, you really are who you say you are.
Is it you?
And I love that because, like, if even John the Baptist had doubts because of he's like being tortured and in a brutal prison and like we're human,
right?
You know, then I can have doubts, and it's like he's been a real hero of mine, actually, John the Baptist.
Me too. I think he's my favourite person.
Well, it's interesting you say that.
So
I'd be interested in what I like about him is that everyone always Jesus says there's no one being greater.
Yes.
He is the number one in the prophets.
That's
number
right.
one. And I always think, like, we think to be number one in life, you've got to be like a leader. You've got to be like, I would think Moses or one of these people, like, on top of the mountain, the big beard, the loud voice, the authority. It's how we're brought up to think these are our people in our lives. who are the leaders. And yet it was the rough one who lived off the land and was wild and just loved this Yeshua character.
Yeah.
And he said no one better. Why do you like?
I think he's fascinating because he seems to be this sort of precursor to Jesus in a weird way. He's the introduction to Jesus. There's a bit of mystery as to who he was and why he was baptizing and why he found his way into the wilderness and what it means to preach a baptism for the repentance of sins and why Jesus would need to undergo that. All of these questions are so interesting. There are also communities of people who particularly revere John the Baptist. There's a group called the Mandaeans who are like this Gnostic sect who think that John the Baptist is the most important prophet. Now they see Jesus as a false prophet actually. There's this whole historical fascination with John the Baptist because and it's also the insistence early on that he is not the Messiah.
He keeps saying I'm not the guy,
which implies to me that at the time there were lots of people who thought he was the Messiah, and
because that's what happens. People want to think somebody great, and then the power goes to your head.
And when Herod Antipas first hears about Jesus, he goes, "This guy is John the Baptist reborn," in the Gospels, and so. What was John the Baptist doing? If when he hears this Jesus guy, it reminds him of John. So it seems like John the Baptist had this incredible ministry, and he must have been doing all kinds of interesting things, and there were all kinds of people who thought he was the Messiah. And so, and we only get clues to that in the Gospels. And so I'd be fascinated. Do you know what? Maybe I'd go to the baptism. So I'd love to meet John the Baptist.
With the sky open.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see too.
Because if you see that, then you know. Because you can't fake that, So in a way, that's as convincing as a resurrection. Because if you're there and you literally see this guy up in the voice of God going, "This is my son,"
and the dove, you kind of get a proof of the Trinity.
Well, it's like
you get to meet John, and you get to see Jesus. It's all there. I think
you know what?
That
they
might be
all
the
saw
moment.
all these things, and yet the next day they would go, "Well,
not so sure.
The clouds could have." And was it thunder that sounded? And that dove, there had been a few doves around that day.
Never enough. What I do know though is that. I speak to a lot of interesting people. I speak to some scientists. If I ever meet one who tells me that they're onto something with time travel, I'll know who to call to go back and meet John the Baptist.
I love it.
Bear Grylls. Thank you for your time.
That was good. That was really good. I like that conversation. He does a lot of deep diving into it. It's funny. Speaking of sky opening up and shit like that, there was a guy I was debating one time on TikTok, and I was talking about cracking the sky, and he couldn't get past that because he was so atheist. He couldn't see the symbol in what I was saying, so I just let him have it. But yeah, that was funny. Anyways, y'all have a good one. I'm out. Peace.